I'm going to close out this weekend for me with a talk about receiving, which is kind of the area of expertise that I've been hired with the Phillies. So this presentation is called Framed, which is, I think, for a lot of catching guys, something they really don't like the terminology there. But I thought it was a great example of kind of looking at guys that not only control the strike zone, but also control the areas around it and can steal some strikes. And what we're finding at the major league level, being able to look a little bit closer at the quality of receivers, rather more so than just what we like to see and what our eyes have traditionally coached us to be, is that the guys that do it at a really high level can keep balls in the strike zone, keep balls on the borderlines of the strike zone, in the zone, and they can also make balls into strikes. Okay, so we're going to slide into this thing, and I'm going to show you guys a video, and I want you guys to kind of think about how this video makes you feel when you see these two events, and I'll ask for a little bit of audience participation after you guys watch this to kind of see if we're on the right track in terms of what you guys feel about this. So here's a video for you guys, real quick.
That ball gets away. That one gets away from Maldonado as Judge moves to second.
Okay, so we have a pass ball and a wild pitch by, for all intents and purposes, two of the best defensive catchers in Major League Baseball. So I wanted to choose those guys because I didn't want to make this, for all intents and purposes, a Gary Sanchez bashing. So I think that's often what catching conversations have been when it comes to talking about the guys that are struggling in this game. And kind of like we talked about yesterday with Tony's presentation, is this is a really hard skill to master, and it's not something that everybody can do at a high level. And what you find with Gary Sanchez is he gets dinged for letting the ball go to the backstop, but in all reality, he ends up being above average in a lot of ways when you watch a big sample of him. So those two guys, we have the pass ball, we have the wild pitch. I'd just like a quick show of hands. If you feel like when you watch that, you think, oh my God, this is the worst thing ever. This is a back-breaking event. This is something that kills our team defense as we go through. Does anybody have that feeling? Is that familiar with them? Okay, right. So you see, that's the kind of thing where, oh man, this is pretty rough. Okay, this is not what we're looking for, and it has a really negative effect on our team. Now I'm going to show you guys a couple of more videos here, and I want to get the same feeling and kind of feel how these compare to the two videos that we just watched in terms of what effect they have on your team, in terms of your inning defensively and the opponent's chances of scoring.
Inside is the call by Hickox.
Up for this, everyone, and look at no one's upset. Everyone, look at that.
Okay, so what you're looking at right there is essentially a sure strike that is called a ball in the Dan Straley video with the Marlins, and then what, for all intents and purposes, is a sure ball that was called a strike in the Red Sox game here. So, show of hands, who feels like this event? These two events are less important than the other two in the grand scheme of how their team prevents runs from scoring for their opponent. Okay? Nobody? All right, well, a couple. So this is one of the first times that no one's raised their hand for that. But what you see, okay, is there are a lot of people that feel like the ball to the backstop is a much more significant play than a lost strike or a stolen strike. And I think that's pretty common amongst baseball. And what we're finding at the major league level is that it's a lot closer than you'd think. So the next slide, I'm going to show you guys some information on run value. Okay, so before I put it up there, just to give you an idea of what run value is, basically in any event where an instance happens, so in any inning where there's a pass ball, the average number of runs scored in innings that have a pass ball. Does that make sense? Everybody have an idea of that? So this next slide, if you guys could throw that up there. All right, so we have three different things. So on the left, a stolen strike, okay? In the middle, a pass ball, and on the far right, a wild pitch. Okay, so stolen strike is just quantified as something with a strike probability of less than 50%. So something that should be called a ball, which we have called a strike, okay, versus a pass ball, everybody knows what that is, and a wild pitch. Okay, obviously sometimes those are the catcher's fault. I understand that on balls that they should block. But also there's a lot of times when the pitcher throws the ball halfway up the backstop and the catcher has nothing to do with it. But what you see here is in terms of run value, in terms of those opportunities when we have a stolen strike in a half inning, okay, how many runs are scored on average, okay? In terms of innings where we have a pass ball, how many runs are scored on average? Okay, in terms of innings where we have a wild pitch, how many runs are scored on average? So what you find is that the stolen strike, okay, is more valuable than the wild pitch. Okay, so if you have one wild pitch and one stolen strike in an inning, you cancel it out. Okay, and it doesn't take a whole lot to cancel out the pass ball. Okay, it's almost the exact same value as a pass ball. So you think about, hey, my guy has the ball go to the backstop. How can he atone for that? How can he make up for it? Taking that pitch and turning it into a strike is one of the ways that we can do that. And what you're also going to see in the next slide here is how many chances that you have to do that versus how many chances you have to block a ball in the dirt. So this pie chart illustrates the average number of pitches handled by Major League catchers in 2018 with runners on base. Okay, so these are your opportunities to have pass balls and wild pitches. Obviously, if there's no one on base and the ball goes to the backstop, it's kind of a no big deal, right? So what you look at here is 91% of pitches with runners on base are opportunities to either have a strike, a ball, or a pass ball. Okay, only 9% are chances to have a wild pitch. So in the grand scheme of things, when we're thinking about base prevention, okay, we talked about some of how we can stop balls from going to the backstop on balls in the dirt on Friday night, but in reality, the majority of the pitches that you're going to handle as a catcher, okay, are going to be balls in the air that you have a chance to swing counts by how you receive the baseball. Okay. So to give you guys a frame of reference with one of our catchers, Jorge Alfaro, so he was, for all intents and purposes, not the best blocker in the league. Okay, I will put it that way. So he was good for about negative 2.4 runs because of balls going to the backstop, balls in the dirt. So when you're thinking about the numbers that we just looked at, he had 10 pass balls last year. So at a value of 0.295 runs per pass ball, okay, he was negative 2.95 on just pass balls alone. Okay. He was negative 12.99 on wild pitches, the 49 or whatever he had. But that doesn't account for balls that he did block, which he did block a lot of balls throughout the course of the year, and also some of those balls that just were not simply his fault. So when you factor those things in with that run probability, it goes to negative 2.4 runs. However, on the flip side, he was one of the best framers in Major League Baseball, according to all of our internal metrics that we have with the Phillies, at almost 20 runs above average for the season. So when you put into all of that into effect, okay, you take out the pass balls, you take out the blocking runs, and he's over 14 runs above average just because of his framing skills alone. Okay, and this is also factoring in one of the best arms in Major League Baseball right now and one of the best arms of all time. Okay, and I kid you not when I say that. Average velocities of 90 miles an hour across the board from behind the plate, as high as 93, the fastest catcher throw in the StatCast era. So a lot of skills there, but what you see is if you can frame the ball at a high level, okay, then you can make up for a lot of things that I think traditionally catching coaches and coaches overall think are the most important things. So we want to make sure that we're prioritizing things in the right way and we're giving our guys a chance to make the most impact on their team. Now, obviously, these stats are accounting for the major league level. Okay, so at the 9 and under level or the 12 and under level, that ball to the backstop may be a little bit more impactful. I totally understand that, and I don't want to endorse hey, the guy from the Phillies came and he spoke and he said that you don't have to block anything, right? That's not what I'm saying. But I want to make sure that you guys do understand that there is a value to this and it's something that's important. The other thing that's worth mentioning is situation is going to dictate a lot what we need to do and what our objective is going to be. There's going to be a lot of times where, the runner advancing the base is more valuable than the stolen strike. But I think what we're finding throughout all of our research with our R&D department and things of that nature is there's a lot of times when traditionally we'd think that the base is more valuable than the strike, but in reality, stealing the strike or keeping the ball in the strike zone is more valuable than the runner advancing the base. So moving on here, I'm just going to give you a quick rundown of some of the metrics that I'll talk about as we go through, just so you guys understand. There's a ton of words on the screen. I'll kind of point you guys in the right direction. So the first one that's important is strike probability. So every pitch runs through an X and Y axis, whether it's, from the center of the plate, 1 inch to the right of the center, okay, and, maybe 14 inches off the ground, okay, so that's its X and Y axis, and it comes up with a strike probability based on how that pitch has been called in the past by Major League umpires. Does that make sense? Everybody has an idea about how that works. So it's not about whether or not the K zone on TV says it should be a strike zone or a striker ball. Okay, that's not what it's about. It's about how it's been called in the past and what that historical data says. The other thing that you should know is just from there, we have to know strike probability, expected called strikes. Okay, so the strike probability will tell you that. If it's a 75% strike, that's an expected called strike of 0.75. Okay, does that make sense? All right, so, and then the last thing is just called strikes. Okay, everyone knows what those are. Those are really easy to quantify. So when we're looking at this, SL plus is the metric that we'll use a lot that I'll refer back to a couple of times in here. And that is simply the called strikes over expected called strikes. So if you have a 100% strike, which is the one that's right down the middle, and you get that call to strike, you get your SL plus would be 100. Okay, it's just an even average number. Okay, that's right down the middle. That means that you're keeping balls in the strike zone as strikes. Okay, if you get a 50% strike, called a strike, obviously then you'd have 1 over 0.5, and you get up a little higher. Does that make sense? Okay, so don't want to linger too much on this slide, but I think it's worth just you guys having an idea of how this works in terms of the strike zone. The last thing to mention is the strike zone on TV is not a good representation of the strike zone. They are all very different. Okay, as you watch through Major League Baseball and you see different TV networks and different ballparks, all those kind of things, do not believe everything you see in terms of those strike zones. There are balls that go through the outside of the zone that are over 90% strikes. There are balls that go through the zone that look like they're absolutely sure strikes that are less than 30%. So moving from there, the other thing that's important to recognize before we talk about the technique is that the strike zone is not a box, right? It is a living organism, okay? This is something that I took from Ryan Cienko. He's the catching coordinator for the Los Angeles Dodgers. I think this is just a great representation of what the strike zone looks like. On the right here, you see, and right over here is average strike zones of Major League umpires. So what you can see is that zone moves, right, from guy to guy. They're very different. Okay, and it's important that as you go through with your guys, you're explaining the importance of being able to adapt how they catch the baseball for how the umpire is calling balls and strikes. Okay, so if we can do that, we have a good probability of being able to be good pitch framers as we go through this thing. Okay, and then the last thing before technique, okay, is just a little example of this. Okay, so you see a pitch right there that looks pretty good. Okay, and you see a pitch that looks pretty inside, and then here's the call.
Minnesota.
Ball.
Works outside and misses.
You can see everyone's surprised. Okay.
Ready, the full count pitch.
Strike three.
And you see a strike call, and you can see likewise everyone's surprised. And if I'm the umpire, I don't want to make that guy unhappy. I can tell you that because he's a pretty big human. So what you guys find is that if you watch those traditionally, the first one is caught a heck of a lot better than the one by Tyler Flowers in the second one. Okay, these are both guys that we're going to look at in this thing, right? Flowers kind of drags it out of the zone. Leone does a pretty good job on a ball where Sale really misses his spot in terms of where Leone sets up of keeping that ball in the zone, but the umpire doesn't reward that, right? So there are going to be times when the catcher does everything that you've taught him to do. Okay, he catches it exactly how you want to, and the umpire just misses the call. Okay, so I want to make sure that that's acknowledged, and it's something that we're talking about as we go through this conversation about receiving and pitch framing, because there is a human element involved, and one that we're just going to have to acknowledge and make sure that we're working within. Okay, so the way that I framed this entire presentation, rather than just giving you guys my perception of what are appropriate techniques for you to teach your guys and how the guys do it at a major league level, I'm going to show you guys a case study of these four gentlemen on the screen right now and tell you what they do well individually that makes them good pitch framers, and it's going to allow you guys to get a framework of how we should attack teaching our players based on what they do rather than just my opinion. Okay, so I think it's a really good practice in terms of looking at skill development, is figuring out what the guys do at the highest level and how we can teach that rather than just sticking with the status quo and teaching what we've always taught because that's what's been taught to us. Okay, so the four guys from left to right, if you can throw that back up there, are Jeff Mathis, who's now with the Texas Rangers, Austin Barnes from the Los Angeles Dodgers, Tyler Flowers, and Sandy Leone. Okay, and the reason I chose these guys is if you look at the leaderboard for framing metrics, so once again, SL plus is the number that we're looking at. An average framer is about 100. Okay, you can see that column's lit up. in the middle of this screen. And a very, very above average framer would be, over 105. Those are the guys that are really, really good. So you can see this is the top 10 in 2018. Okay, Jeff Mathis was first. Austin Barnes was second, Sandy Leone was seventh, and Tyler Flowers was 10th in 2018. Okay, I chose these guys for a couple of reasons. One, because none of them were from the same organization. Two, they all have very distinctly different styles, and I want to make sure that we attack some different approaches because everyone's body is different, and they're going to have different restraints that they just physically can't get to balls because of how different guys' bodies work. And then finally, I just wanted to give you guys just as many different opportunities and options that you could have to coach your guys as possible. And then after this, I'll talk a little bit about my guys and some of the things that we did for them that was effective for them. So diving into this, Jeff Mathis, who obviously last year was with the Arizona Diamondbacks. What you're seeing in the bottom left corner is a heat map of where he receives the ball above average. So red is good, blue is bad. Okay, to make that pretty simple. So you can see bottom of the zone is where he excels, okay, and also off the right side of his body, away from righties and into lefties is kind of his hot area. You can see there is some struggles at the top of the zone. That's typically what you'll see with a lot of guys is most catchers either catch the bottom of the zone really well or the top of the zone, okay? So I'm going to let a video play here and give you guys a chance to kind of take in how he receives the baseball, see some of the things, make some conclusions on your own, and then I'll go through about 6 things for Jeff Mathis that I think are really important for him.
Trevor's with that hit, and here's Altuve.
So you may want to take that into consideration. Maybe you got some relatives in town.
Strike on the inside.
We did some lip reading. Guess what? A fast
1-0 to Rojas outside.
Now box.
The 1-0 to Kemp. There's a strike.
Called strike 3. That was way off the plate, but he got the call.
The announcer reactions and the hitter reactions are great in these low strike probability pitches.
Again.
Called strike 3. A fastball at 90 is in there.
Forced to be back on a big lead.
Listen to this. Can you hear what he says? No, that's in. It's in. So, and he's 100% right. He absolutely is. So what you saw there is a lot of pitches that are between 40 and 60% strikes. So those are the borderline. Okay, that is exactly where the strike zone is at a border. In theory, if the K zone was perfect on TV, these would all be balls that are right on that strike zone line. However, you can see there are some that are in, some that are out as we go through, and then also some balls that are less than 15% strikes. So those are stolen strikes. Those are absolutely pitches that should be called balls. Okay, but you're finding that these guys can turn them into strikes at a pretty high level, and here's some of the ways that they can do that. I think Jeff Mathis is a guy that is really what most people would consider textbook. Okay, everyone watches that and they're like, yeah, that guy's pretty good, right? Okay, I think that's pretty clear. But I could tell that by the way that you guys were whispering to each other and kind of starting to point out some things that you saw and everything like that. But part of the way he does that, he's very subtle. He doesn't do a lot with his glove. You can see right here, this is actually slowed down. There's a full speed clip, a half speed clip, and a 25% speed clip. Okay, and it pretty much looks the same. Typically with guys, you're going to find that when you slow things down, the movement looks a lot more exaggerated than it does in full speed. But with Mathis, there's not a lot of a change in terms of how he receives the baseball based on the speed of the clip. Okay, moving on. All right, so his hand load. You can see there's not a lot of relax of the glove. Okay, a lot of people like to talk about kind of turning their fingers down or the quarter turn or things of that nature. He likes to keep his pocket exposed to the baseball. It's something that a lot of people feel comfortable with because they feel like they have better access to the pocket. Okay, but you can see where the magic happens is in his elbow, okay, in this clip. So if you watch his elbow, you see that thing goes back, okay, and allows himself to relax the elbow, okay, but still keep the pocket square to the pitch, which allows him to access the pocket at a pretty high level, which you see there's not a lot of balls rattling around in his glove as we go, okay? Additionally, okay, when he moves left to right or right to left, his glove does a really good job of staying down. You don't see a lot of glove bob as he goes to his right, okay, or back to his left. You see his glove kind of from wherever he relaxes his glove, okay? He works straight to the point of the ball, beats it to a spot, and allows him to keep that ball in the zone. So even though he's set up away and the pitcher misses in, okay, he can still keep it a strike because his glove stays down, it stays under the baseball, and allows him to manipulate it back up to the zone. Okay, at the bottom of the zone, you can see it's a little receptive. So there's 2 pauses in this clip, okay? A pause here at extension, okay? And then he brings it into flexion, okay? That's how he manipulates the pitch. That's how he gets the ball from below the zone to into the zone as he closes his glove, okay? So it's not a big move after he catches, but as the glove closes, he's receiving the ball in and he's raising it up to the height of his elbow, okay, which allows him to keep this ball in the strike zone and, take a pitch that I think is it LeMahieu? No, I'm not sure who the hitter is, but he's obviously not going to be very happy with it. That ball looks like it's pretty down and away from a lot of purposes. And you see him do this a lot. And he's very subtle with it. All right, you're going to see Barnes move it a lot more, but he gets from extension into flexion as he receives that ball up into the zone. Okay, at the top of the zone, you see the exact flip opposite. All right, so he goes from flexion, okay, he's bent as he attacks this baseball, and then he goes into extension, okay, for a more traditional stick, if you guys will, to keep this ball in the zone. He's a little stronger with his hands up here, and that's what allows him to keep this ball in the zone. Okay, now, this isn't necessarily Mathis's area of expertise. If you guys remember his heat map, it's a little cooler up there, okay? When you see Leone, you'll see what he does with this pitch and how he allows himself to manipulate this a little bit more even than Mathis does, but you can see Mathis pretty strong, pretty through the baseball, flexion into extension. Okay? And then finally, this is where one of the things I think he does exceptionally well, and this is how he steals the strike with LeMahieu. This is the one I was thinking about. You can watch his head when this clip starts. It's outside of the strike zone box. Okay? He has his weight loaded up, if you throw the video camera on me here. So he'll load his weight to the right side when he sets his target, and then as the pitch comes in, he'll kind of sway back into his left leg as he closes his glove, right? So it's a little sleight of hand there, but it really allows him to tell the umpire that he's set up in the middle of his body, okay? And then as the pitch comes to him, he moves a little bit, and it looks like it hits him right in the middle of the body, even though in reality, that ball's, a couple of balls off the plate right there. So that's a great way when you guys have, built the basis of skill set for your catchers, that they can start manipulating pitches even more, is getting that set up to a place where they can work the ball back to the zone. Okay, now, going into Austin Barnes. Similar heat map, okay? It's a little cooler at the top, right? But it is exceptionally red at the bottom, okay? This is one of the best receivers in Major League Baseball, in my opinion, okay? Because of a lot of things that you'll see. But once again, I'm going to give you a chance to watch the video, take a peek at it, come to your own conclusions, and then we'll go over some of the things that I think are really important for him.
Got him.
Last year's NLCS. Kershaw was outstanding in game.
One more save, but he had the very first.
Yeah, strike. And a big part of the
Everyday role. In fact, for Pena, this is
2008. Here's the 3-1. Another curve, another strike.
Hill home with a 1-2 to get him on the outside corner. Nice pitch, 2-2. 2 gone for Peralta. Well placed by Hill. Strike one. Here's his 1-0. Got a generous call there from Corey Blazer.
That's the other catcher, too, so you know he's pissed.
Kevin Maben with 2 out. Looks at a slider for a strike.
All right, so you can see there, this is a little bit less textbook, for lack of a better word. All right, when you watch Mathis, he's very subtle. Okay, Barnes is the opposite of that. He's not subtle whatsoever. Okay, but his hands are electric. Right, that glove really can move through the baseball as he closes that glove, and it allows him to do a lot of things. So to highlight that, this is in full speed. This isn't sped up whatsoever. Okay, and if you watch this thing just regular speed, how fast that glove moves, that's why he does the damage that he does. Okay. He just does an outstanding job of getting below the baseball, getting outside the baseball, and then flying through that thing as he closes the glove, right? So that pitch is to George Springer. He's one of the best players in our game, and he's getting that call every time. What you see with a lot of guys, especially the guys that aren't very good, is when there's a really good hitter up, when Bryce Harper hits, okay, who's hopefully wearing a Phillies uniform next year, I'm hoping. But when he hits, the strike zone gets a lot smaller, okay? When the backup catcher hits, The strike zone's pretty big. You want to get this thing over with, right? So what you'll see with Barnes with a lot of these clips is they're against the best hitters in our game because he really does an outstanding job of being consistent every single pitch with that glove speed and working the ball back into the zone. Okay, the next thing, okay, going back to the same topic, is angling, right? So you can see when the glove stops, okay, the pocket is outside the ball right there, okay? So he goes from setup right in the middle of the zone, then you see big pocket flash outside the ball, which allows him to manipulate the ball back through the zone as he closes that gigantic glove that he uses, right? Okay, so one of the things that allows him to do is just move the ball a lot, but it also allows him to always be on time to the pitch, right? The ball's never on, he's never catching the inside of the ball. He is what we call catching the ball side of the ball every time. Okay, so if you're thinking about cues for your catchers, that's a great one for them to think about, is always trying to catch the side of the ball that is a ball, okay? Right, if you think about the ball being on the corner of the plate, half of it's on the plate, a strike, half of it's off the plate, a ball. Okay, so attacking that ball from the ball side is a great cue to think about with your catchers. Okay, so the next thing that Barnes does, so we're talking about extension into flexion. Okay, same thing that Mathis does. Okay, but what he can do at an exceptionally high level is he really turns his thumb down and creates a downward forearm angle. Okay, this is what allows him to bring the ball back up to the zone. Okay, as he gets his thumb under the baseball, right? That traditional phrase, thumb underneath, okay? It's not like this, okay? It has to happen with your thumb turning this way, okay? As your thumb turns here, that allows you to, as you close your glove, okay, leverage that thing back up to the zone and get the glove to the height of your elbow every single time. Okay, as you keep your elbow up in kind of this chicken wing position, okay, that everyone says is the worst thing ever for catchers, okay, it's not. Okay, it's actually really helpful because it allows you to create leverage up towards the zone. Okay, and what the umpire sees, okay, is the same effect as the ball that's hit right at the center fielder. Okay, the line drive right at the center fielder that the guy freezes on, he doesn't know where to go. Right, he can't tell if it's coming right at him, if it's short of him, if it's above him. Okay, the umpire has the same effect with his eyes there when the ball's coming straight at his eyes. Okay, he can't tell how high it is. He can just tell it's the glove's moving right back towards him. So it could be straight in the middle of the zone. It could be very much so at the bottom. Okay, but when you start to create that action consistently from every pitch that's thrown, then the umpire starts to have a really tough time figuring out where those pitches really are. Okay, his setup. Okay, so you're going to watch him set up for a lefty and a righty. You can tell his feet are as square as you're going to get. There is no staggering in there. There's no Yadier Molina stagger to try to throw somebody out. He wants to make sure that he's giving 4 points of contact to his pitcher every time with both knees and both shoulders to give him a really good target, keep as many balls on his chest as possible, and be as strong as he can. Okay, finally, the hand load. Okay, this is where one of the things I think Barnes does an incredible job of is it is like robotic. If you ever watch him catch a side before the game, if you can get into the stadium early, I've seen him for 20 minutes squat down in the outfield with no pitcher right here and just work on his hand load. Boom, over and over and over and over again, right? Because he's almost obsessive about it, which allows him to always get that glove to the ball on time. Okay, so what you see in the video here, if you can throw that back up there, is he kind of loads it until he goes, okay? So sometimes he'll just load it once. I think that's kind of the preferred, but if he finds himself loading it a little early, he'll just keep loading, and go, right? So it allows him to stay really relaxed and allows him to keep working underneath the baseball. As you can see, he flies right underneath that thing and brings that ball up to the zone with Justin Bohr, who's once again one of the better hitters in our game, okay? I think this is the last one for Barnes, curveball, okay? You can see when this ball's halfway there, he hasn't moved yet. Okay, this is a ball that's up at the top of the zone that's going to hit him in the mask if he doesn't catch it, right? But he wants to wait and see that ball out of the hand, okay? That ability to wait is what allows him to make decisions about where the pitch is going to be because he really sees it first, okay? He doesn't jump right when the ball comes out of his hand. What you see with a lot of catchers, especially the ones that don't catch it very well, is when the ball comes out of the pitcher's hand, when they load their hand, it comes up. Okay, glove lift is the number one killer, in my opinion, for good receiving. Okay, if your catcher's hand starts here and comes up, okay, that's going to be really tough to combat. You have to have incredibly strong hands to be able to work underneath the ball from a position that's higher than the target set. Okay, so from the target, it's got to work down just a little bit, okay, to allow you to work underneath the low ball. Okay, Flowers. Okay, who likes Tyler Flowers? Let's just take a show of hands. I'm the only one? Okay, geez, thank you, finally. Okay, so this guy is controversial because he does a lot of things that are not textbook whatsoever, but when you think about this, I want you to watch what he does and think about what you think is textbook. Okay, so for me, it's when I load my hand, can I stay below the baseball? Can I work positive angles? Can I give the umpire a good view? Those are the things that I find to be really important with catchers. Okay, and I think if you watch Tyler Flowers right here and you think about those three things, those are going to be things that he tends to do really well, even though it's in a non-traditional way. Okay, so here's his video.
And it's going to be in there for strike.
As a single and one of the 3 Dodger runs scored. And
for me, DeGrom has been the best pitcher and the most consistent pitcher. He hasn't had AIDS.
And he was plenty good enough last night, as that's in for a strike.
Part of that broadcast, and they're going to let me in.
Here's Brett Gardner. And Gardner did not like that call.
Huh?
It's not a strike.
Even the announcer knows.
Oh, strike 3 call. Miller thought the pitch was in.
And Kevin takes strike 3 called.
In Philadelphia to sweep that doubleheader. Oh, he rang him up.
All right, so you can see the same kind of thing there. Some great reactions from hitters. Now, with Flowers, what does he do with his hand, right? That thing is underneath the ball as long as anybody else, okay? So it's non-traditional in how he gets the hand loaded all the way to the ground, okay? But his attack angle is from underneath the baseball every single time. And even though he's one of the bigger guys, this is a really physical cat. If you guys see him in person, you walk next to Tyler Flowers in the street and you're like, look at this linebacker right here. Holy cow, what a big guy, right? But he does an exceptional job of setting his body up in a way where he can work underneath the baseball even though he's a really big dude, okay? From there, okay, once again, you can see the glove is flat, backside of the glove on the ground, okay? So what he's allowing himself to do is kind of like Barnes does with that breaking ball, see the ball out of the hand, identify where it is, and then work underneath the baseball. Once again, this is with Manny Machado, who I also hope is wearing a Phillies uniform at the end of this year. He is one of the better hitters in our game, but he's getting this pitch called a strike because the glove action is so consistent. It's working from underneath the baseball because of where he starts and how he sets up, okay? This is the thing I think that is alarming when you watch Tyler Flowers in person, if you ever get a chance to do this, is he is as close to home plate as any catcher in Major League Baseball that I have seen. And if you get a chance to see it on the angle, okay, it's exceptional how good of a job he does with that. So you can see he really walks up towards the plate and gets very close to it. Okay, this one, right, he gives the umpire not much of a look, right? There's no presentation here, okay? You can see that glove just keeps moving the whole time, and he just throws it right back to Fulton Evans, and he does a great job of making the umpire do his job, okay? This is something that we talk a lot with our guys, is of eliminating self-umpiring, okay? The guy that catches the ball that they perceive to be two balls off the plate and just throws it right back to the umpire without presenting it whatsoever or moving it back towards the zone doesn't get calls. Okay, the guy that catches every ball like they think it's a strike gets way more calls from the umpire because the umpire is forced to actually do his job, right? Okay, and as we know, okay, especially at lower levels when you get out of Major League Baseball and into the minor leagues and college and high school, the umpires aren't very good. Okay, they're doing their best, but I think like Tony talked about, those guys are probably accountants during the day. Okay, so they're not necessarily paid to be umpires. Okay, so if you can do that, you give yourself a really good chance. The thing with Flowers that I think is unique is that umpires will tell you across the board that they don't like umpiring behind him, okay? But he always gets strikes called, okay? Because they don't feel like he presents them and gives them a good look of how far off the plate the ball is. They feel like they really have to check. On the flip side, they love umpiring behind the guys that are really poorly rated receivers, okay? They think that they do an outstanding job of giving them a really good look. Okay, and they absolutely do, and that's why they keep calling balls. Okay, so if we can do a good job of working the ball back to the middle of the plate, we're forcing the umpire to do his job, which is a really tough one to do, and we can help ourselves a lot in that regard. Okay, at the top of the zone, because he's so big, he can set up on a knee and he can still work really strong hands, which allows him to be a little more neutral in his heat map than a lot of the other guys. Okay, so he just dominates that ball at the top of the zone with a upright setup. Okay? And the last thing is he really gives the umpire a unique angle because he sets up so angled and so much on the corners that a lot of times he doesn't have the ability, or the umpire gets a full plate look at every pitch, which I think is really important. Okay. last guy, Sandy Leone, will try to power through this thing in the next 3 minutes or so. Okay, so this heat map is very different, right? Obviously, you can see he is going to work almost exclusively at the top of the zone, okay, where he has success, and not as much at the bottom, okay, but there's a reason for that I perceive to be one that's calculated. It may not be, okay, but when you look at these next couple of slides, you're going to really figure out why both Sandy Leone and Christian Vasquez, in my opinion, set up the way that they do. Okay, so this slide is made by a buddy of mine who's the coordinator for the Minnesota Twins, Tanner Swanson. He spoke here last year. Outstanding catching guy. So I just stole this from him. I told him I was going to use it in this presentation, but I think it's a great slide and it portrays some great stuff. So at the bottom of the zone across Major League Baseball, they throw about 45% of the pitches down there, okay? So that's where the pitches are, okay? So that's why you see the guys that receive at a really high level catching the bottom of the zone well, okay? As you can see, as we go up the chain, okay, the percentages get lower and lower and lower. Now, on the flip side, okay, here's the Boston Red Sox, okay? This is who Sandy Leone catches for, okay? They are first in Major League Baseball and pitches at the top of the zone, almost 35%, 7% above the league average, okay? And at the bottom of the zone, they are last in Major League Baseball. They pitch down there less than anyone else, okay? So they really want to make sure that they're catching the top of the zone well, okay? So I'm going to skip through a little bit. I'm just going to show you a little bit of this because I'm running out of time.
Out to the pitcher. Obviously, the Blue Jays need.
We'll see them no more. Here's the 0-2. And that's in there for strike. Braves have made very good contact most of the year, and that's a strike.
Okay, so what you see is a really heavy hand, one that keeps the ball in the top of the zone well, okay? And he does this by how he sets up. You can see, rather than having his feet flat on the ground as he sets up, he's on his toes, he's upright, he's in a position that typically we wouldn't want our catchers to be in, but it allows him to access the top of the zone at a level that not everyone else is capable of, okay? Number two, he's got an incredible hand strength. Once again, Manny Machado, okay, blowing him up on a pitch that shouldn't be called a strike, okay, because he just cuts this ball off in the zone with hand strength, okay? So totally different than you see with Mathis and Barnes, where they're a little bit more receptive at the bottom, okay? He's using the strength of his hands to keep that ball in the zone, okay? Hand load, a little more neutral than the other guys, right? He kind of just keeps it where it is, stays in the middle, allows him to get to the top of the zone and to the bottom, okay? Am I actually at 5 or am I out of time? You said out, you said 5. There we go. Okay, I thought I was doing better. This thing says 5, so I'm going off that. I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to blow you up. But he keeps neutral with the hand load, okay? He does a really good job of being able to get above his body, but also catch some balls below his body, which allows him to kind of be pretty neutral with that and catch a lot of different pitches. That's why he's a little more around the zone with the heat map. Okay, at the bottom, when it's really low, okay, this is to the best hitter maybe ever, okay, Mike Trout, if you guys know who that is. You can see what he's going to do is the same thing. This ball is below the zone, extension, in deflection as he receives that ball up, takes the ball towards the umpire's eyes, and he loses track of how high that pitch actually is, even though it's to a hitter that traditionally would have a very small strike zone because he is awesome, okay? So, next thing here, okay, as the ball gets on the right side of his body, he does more of a doorknob turn, okay, than extension in deflection, okay? So he takes his hand and he's going to turn around the baseball as the ball comes in, okay? It's one of the ways that especially guys with stronger hands can keep the ball into the strike zone by manipulating the ball back towards the plate. Okay, so can you guys see how that works? Okay, so for those guys that maybe don't have as much feel for the bottom of the zone, but they're just really brutishly strong, this can be a great technique for them to work at the bottom of the zone when traditionally they don't get down there as well as you'd like. Okay, and then the last thing, okay, he moves a lot. Okay, so there's a lot of people would say this is bad catching, okay, but he does get this pitch called a strike. You'll see what he wants to do as much as possible is keep his chest behind the baseball because, as we all know, when your chest is behind it, okay, you're the strongest. Okay, so that little bit of body movement is not as big of a distractor of the umpire as I think a lot of people think, and it allows him to stay stronger on more pitches than a lot of guys do. So being able to move a little bit within your stance is something that I definitely endorse. I don't know if I would quite say that much, but if you can move your hips from each side into the left heel, into the right heel, okay, this is a reasonable amount of movement that you can create that allows your catchers to be able to keep strikes in the strike zone. Okay, so my guys, all right, so some of the things that we did with these guys that I think is helpful, and I think it will give you guys a little bit of a roadmap of maybe where you want to attack some things with your guys as you go through. So Andrew Knapp, he actually played for Tony in college, so we have a unique connection with him, a catcher from Cal Berkeley, his dad played up into the minor leagues, like 10 years of minor league baseball, okay? And then on the very, very opposite side in terms of learner and type of guy and things like that, Jorge Alfaro, who's one of the, I think, like 10 Major League Baseball players from Colombia, okay? He speaks great English, so that's not an issue for me. But he's going to learn in a totally different way than the Cal Berkeley educated kid, Andrew Knapp, but which creates some different challenges and things of that nature, but it ends up being really exciting for me because you get to coach in completely different ways. Okay, so for Nappy, he's incredibly mobile, okay, but one of the things that helped him a ton was varying his setups a lot like Tyler Flowers does. So what you'll see him do is when there's runners on base, I mean, he's a pretty traditional setup, but when there's not guys on base, you see a lot of stepping forward and working underneath onto one knee, okay? The other thing that was completely new to him this year is we set him up on his right knee a lot, and it allowed him to create that downward forearm angle that he had a really hard time with creating traditionally. So being able to get into some of those different setups allowed him to give the umpire good angles, but also forced him to do some things that he wasn't really comfortable doing in the past. Okay, working on his hand load. Okay, the thing that he did was he was a quarter turn guy, and he liked to get it over here. Okay, because that's the pitch that you want to protect, right? You don't want to get thumbed. Okay, so guys tend to work this way. The more that we can stay neutral in the middle of our body and keep that hand loading just straight down, okay, or down this way, or even just loading the hand back like Mathis does, okay, the better they're going to be. And then just like Leone does, we had to work a lot with Nappy on just being able to stay behind the ball and being subtle as he moves to the left and to the right. Okay, Alfaro, okay. With him, he had a hard time being able to stay behind the baseball and getting his face into the strike zone enough. Okay, he's a bigger guy. He wants to tend to be back and upright. Okay, so we had to get him to get his face into the play a little bit more, really move his body forward so we can get under the baseball a little bit more. He used a lot of one knee setups, which for him, being a less mobile guy, was really helpful. If you guys have guys that lack mobility, one knee setups are 100% the way to go. You're going to see more of it in Major League Baseball than you've ever seen as we go forward the next couple of years. And I would anticipate you're going to start seeing guys catching off of one knee with runners on base. I think it's absolutely going to happen. And then the last couple things is hand loads with him, being able to work in different setups for different pitches. So if it's a curveball, he tends to work more to the ground like Flowers. Slider, he's going to work more to his right. Sinker, he's going to work more in this way and try to prepare for the toughest pitch that could be thrown of the whatever pitch is called. Okay, so whatever location is the toughest, he tries to set up for that one and then works back to the zone everywhere else. Okay, and the last thing was just being comfortable moving the baseball, manipulating pitches, and getting it back to the zone. He'd been a guy that really wanted to stick it, okay? So allowing him to move the ball through was really, really helpful and helped him a ton, okay? So I'm out of time. If you guys want to see that last slide, it's a kind of a recap of what these guys do and what are some of the commonalities amongst the great receivers in Major League Baseball. But thank you guys for having me. Thank you to Baseball Ontario for this event. It's been great.